I think we'll get started so that we can make the most out of the conversation. Welcome everybody to this first Conversations with Scientists of the 2017 Yale Ciencia Academy. It's really great to have you all with us. We'll have a great panel today. We're going to be discussing postdocs. I'll just briefly introduce myself. I'm Monica Ferlio-Mojer. I am the Yale Ciencia Academy coordinator. We also have Giovanna Guerrero Medina, who is the director of and the principal investigator of the Yale Ciencia Academy. Let's see. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? Okay. I just saw somebody say in the chat, you're talking to us, and I'm like, yes, I'm talking to you. Okay. We'll see. Okay, you can't hear us. Well, Giovanna, can you help out Limari while I introduce our panelists? Okay, let me pull up their bios and we'll get started. Okay, so as I mentioned, our conversation today is going to revolve around securing a postdoc. We have three fabulous scientists who are postdocs, have been postdocs, or hire postdocs. And so they will share their experiences as postdocs, and they will share practical advice and strategies that help them during the process of being a postdoc. So first, we have Dr. Reyna Martínez De Luna. She is a research scientist at SUNY Upstate Medical University, that's State University of New York, Upstate Medical University. She completed her postdoctoral training at her current institution under the guidance of Dr. Michael Suber. Reyna earned her PhD in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology at The Ohio State University after obtaining a bachelor's degree in general biology at the University of Puerto Rico at Humacao. In her research, she is interested in understanding how the retina degenerates and regenerates using the African clawed frog Xenopus levis as a model system. Her next step is to obtain a faculty position at an institution that values both a productive research program and teaching. And outside the lab, Reyna works to make science accessible to all by being part of Ciencia Puerto Rico's volunteer team. She also enjoys to experiment in the kitchen, traveling, and reading. Next up, we have Dr. Janitza Montalvo-Ortiz. She is a third-year postdoctoral research associate in the Division of Human Genetics and the Department of Psychiatry at Yale School of Medicine. Janitza received her bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras, and she then completed a PhD in neuroscience at Northwestern University. In August of 2014, she joined Dr. Joel Gellerterns, I'm sure to butcher that, lab at Yale. Her main research interest is the study of genetics and epigenetics of neuropsychiatry disorders in humans. And her research involves the use of bioinformatics and computational biology tools to analyze genome-wide data sets to identify novel genetics and epigenetic markers associated with the risk of psychiatric disorders and drug abuse. And last but not least, we have Dr. Manuel Navedo. He is an associate professor in the Department of Pharmacology at the University of California, Davis. His research aims to understand the mechanisms by which local and global calcium signals regulate excitation contraction coupling and excitation transcription coupling in arterial smooth muscle cells during physiological and pathological conditions. His lab employs several techniques, including molecular biology, patch clamp electrophysiology, and confocal and turf microscopy. Manuel obtained his bachelor's degree in general science and his PhD in neurobiology from the University of Puerto Rico, and he did a postdoctoral fellowship in vascular biology at the University of Washington in Seattle. So again, thank you to Manuel, Reyna, and Janitza for joining us. We're really excited to have you in this conversation. We're looking forward to your advice. And so I am actually going to pass the baton to our agent provocateurs. We have some students that worked on coming up with questions, finding resources to lead our conversation. So I will pass it to you guys. Why don't you get us started with the questions that you prepared?
Okay. Hi, my name is Eileen. I'm from the University of Puerto Rico Medical Sciences campus, and I will start off first. My first question is, what is the ideal timeline for searching for a postdoctoral position?
All right. Does anybody want to start before me? Janitza, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, since I'm the most recent one that just started the postdoc a few years ago. So I finished my postdoc in my 5th year. So it all depends on the year that you hope or expect to complete your PhD. I would say I graduated in June and I started looking for postdoc in February, March. So it's just to get familiar with the institutions and also the departments and the professors in each institution that I was most interested to work on. So that will take a couple of months to do research on. And then once you identify those that you're most interested, then you make a list of those professors and you started writing emails. That will say like by the end of March, just to say something more concrete. But those emails has to be very, with a lot of details on it, your description, your career path, what you hope to get in your training, and also your contribution to the lab, right? So once you get a schedule of different interviews, let's say beginning of April, then you start going to the different places and give you some time so it doesn't interfere with you writing your thesis or finishing up a few experiments that you have left in your PhD lab. And I would say that will give you plenty of time also to apply for institutional grants if there are any, because most of the responses that you will get if you do this method of directly contacting the PIs is that it will be much easier if you get your own funding. So scheduling interviews ahead of time will give you more time to prepare for applications for institutional grants. I would say, yeah, start at least half a year of what you expect to graduate.
So I think Janitza's right. I like to add to that. I mean, I got my postdoc a year before I finished. And so it depends on what lab you're interested in. Usually big labs that have a lot of people, you want to contact the PIs at least the year before, because sometimes I've had colleagues that they contacted the PI like 3-4 months before they were done, and they said they didn't have any space because all the spaces were already taken. You know, it depends on how much funding they have and how many people have contacted them. So start early. And like my PhD advisor used to say, anytime is good for to look for a job. So and the other thing I like to add to that, it's true that when you're doing your PhD, you get interested in certain topics, you sort of have an idea of what science you would like to continue pursuing and what science you don't. So besides, and that allows you to contact the PIs and email them and let them know that you're interested. Are they looking? Would they be looking to hire? But other than that, I would add that going to conferences and networking is extremely important. That's actually how I found my postdoc. So I was at a conference, and my previous PI introduced me to the PI that I worked with so far, that I'm working with now. And we just started talking at the poster, and he casually said, "Are you interested in a job?" I said, "Well, I won't finish, until another year." But he said, "That's fine." And we started a conversation then. So I say going to conferences, meeting people, it's a really good strategy as well.
Yeah, I will just echo what they say already. So minimum a year in advance. Once you know that you are about to finish in 1 year before that, then you need to start looking for a postdoc. The process usually will take between 2 months, 6 months, depending on how easy or how easy it is for somebody to, or whether somebody will offer you a position or not. So a year ahead of time would be an ideal circumstances. And then remember that once you get that postdoc, negotiation process start. So typically you can negotiate up to 6 months before you join the lab. So that gives you a little bit of leeway to finish what you need to do and then move on to the next step.
Excellent. So before we move on and our agent provocateurs continue with the questions, I like to step back and I'd like each of you to talk briefly about what is a postdoc and why do you want to do a postdoc? I think it is, if you are as a trainee, particularly if you're interested in academia, that doing a postdoc is a necessary first step. Or next step rather, but that's not necessarily true if you want to go into non-research, non-academic careers. But I think that it's traditionally been an important part of training to become an independent scientist, particularly a principal investigator. So I'll like each of you to talk about what is a postdoc and what do you want to do a postdoc for?
A postdoc is an extended period of training. Once you have your formal PhD, then what do you do with it? So basically, you just go to a postdoc to learn other techniques, other skills that hopefully will help you, no matter whether you're staying in the academia or going to the industry. But hopefully the skills that you learn in that postdoc will help you move on to the next level. So if you think that your career path is the academia, certainly a postdoc is absolutely necessary. Nobody will consider you for a faculty appointment if you don't have one or multiple postdoctoral experience. That's the reality these days, and I've seen it with a couple of faculty search already. But while it is true that you don't need a postdoc if perhaps your career path take you to the industry. I've seen a couple of examples from friends that went to the industry that they did the postdoc, and ultimately they're doing things that are very similar to what I'm doing. So having that postdoctoral experience, I think might have helped them a little bit when they're doing the things that they're doing now in the industry. So that's basically my take on that.
I mean, to add to what Manuel said, I think a postdoc is a temporary position, which at least, I won't speak for all the fields, because like a postdoc in pharmacology or chemistry, I have no idea about. But at least in the biomedical sciences, it used to be that postdocs would be 3-4 years. They're recently being extended because every time the research gets more and more complex. But I think it's a temporary position where you basically do become more of an expert at whatever techniques, but not only technically, also you grow professionally. So for example, as a graduate student, you might have written grants, but not to the level that you do when you're a postdoc. Papers, writing, you grow a lot in your writing, you grow a lot in planning experiments and actually the process of science, right? When you're a PhD student, you are at your best when you're almost done. So because everybody knows at the beginning, you're just like learning all the techniques and you struggle with experiments. So then by the time when you're actually there and you are proficient and an expert at what you do, that's when you graduate. So then you go on and move on to a postdoc where the emphasis is a little different. And this depends on the places. So, but the emphasis is a little different. You're more of a colleague to the PIs, right, that you're working for. And you can contribute more ideas, and it's a good phase. It's a really good phase.
So I will echo again what they said. The main goal of a postdoc is to get independence as an academic researcher. That's the ultimate goal. It's an extended training from your PhD to gain new skills, and as Reyna said, not only technically or scientifically, also how to manage a lab in terms of writing your own grants, getting your own funding, publishing manuscripts in high impact journals. Those are skills that are gained through postdoc training. So the question that asked Marcos Javier about whether postdoc experiences in the industry will be helpful if you decide then to try academia afterwards. I would say the training that you get from postdoc in the industry, and it's different from what you will get in the academia for the reasons I just explained. You have to get your own grants, your own funding, and for that you have to be in an academic environment that will foster your training and your skills. And I think once you get that independence, then it will be much easier to switch to an academic or faculty position. I think that's...
Let me add something there because people think that in the industry you might not write grants, and that's not necessarily true. I review for NIH, and actually there's a whole bunch of small business grants that comes. They're mostly from biotech companies, and those grants are written basically by people like us, like you guys. Once you get to that position in the industry. So in order to acquire seed money so that you can develop a drug in a small biotech, etc. And that money is basically then used to develop that whole process. That requires that you develop your writing skills and your research skills. And I think that then, in that sense, a postdoc is getting it will be even useful for somebody that is interested to going into like the small biotech companies, right, or mid-level biotech companies, where you're really developing drugs, etc. If your goal perhaps is to be in more of a technical area, quality control, quality assurance, maybe you don't need that much those extra skills, although I'm guessing that you're going to have to write a lot of policy reports, etc. There. So, yeah, I mean, just echoing Janitza and Reyna, I mean, you get a lot of skills, different skills, writing, research, new techniques, etc. And that eventually, if you take advantage of those opportunities, of the postdoctoral opportunity, you can take it to do whatever you want, either in the academia, the private sector, or even what Monica and Giovanna are doing, which is alternative career, right, Monica?
Let's not say that.
I know. Which is a different line of work, and in which these two, Monica and Giovanna, has been extremely successful. So.
And I didn't need a postdoc for that.
Right, and I will add to that it will depend also on fields, in different fields. My field in neuroscience and behavioral sciences, related fields, the kind of experience that you get from the industry is more technical. Whereas as with chemistry, maybe you get more independent on developing your own drugs and writing your own grants. So I guess it will be specific to the type of field that you're getting training on.
Wonderful. Let's see. I see a few questions on the chat, but I wanted to give Victor, Eileen, or Simara the opportunity. Do you have any other questions, guys, that you prepared that you want to ask our panelists before we move on to the questions that your colleagues are asking?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, what resources do you guys think would be most beneficial towards finding a postdoc opportunity?
I think Reyna touched on a very good point. I remember when I did my PhD with Jose Lasalde in Puerto Rico, so perhaps some of you know. And one of the good things about the training that I received is that Dr. Lasalde basically, he encouraged us to go to different meetings. And at that time, 98 or so, we didn't call that networking. We didn't know that it was networking. But I remember that at the end of my PhD, I knew people starting to recognize me as grad student of Dr. Lasalde, and they start offering me these positions. So I think that is extremely, extremely important that you guys start developing your networks right away. And how do you do that? You cannot be shy. You need to, if you see somebody that you're interested to work with, you need to reach out to that person, either at a meeting or by email or any other way. Reach out, talk with them. Don't be shy. You need to basically expose yourself. Make sure that they know that you exist. That is critical for a postdoc. What else?
I mean, I think
keep talking with people. I mean, if you know somebody at the beginning of your PhD and you're interested in the research of that person, maintain a communication with that person. Actually, that's how I ended up with my postdoc in Seattle. But those are some of the tricks or tools that I use for my postdocs.
Yeah, so I agree that going to conferences and also do a lot of networking helps a lot. I mean, I know plenty of you already know, or if you don't, there are also online resources that for job postings for postdocs. There's Nature Jobs, Society for Neuroscience also have their own online database. Ciencia Puerto Rico constantly posts job offers. Your own department from your institution also emails frequently postdoc positions. And most of the time, those job offers are for candidates to do a specific job of a specific grant that the PI is looking for to hire. If you want more flexibility and more independence in the early stage of the kind of science that you want to do, or if you want to do a big transition from, like I did, from basic science to more translational clinical experience, I would say it's critical to find your own funding And for that is to look up for NSF, NRSAs, and also institutional grants that you can apply directly and get more independence on the kind of research projects that you want to be involved with. So one of the questions, I think it was maybe Fabi Cruz, maybe it doesn't necessarily your postdoc doesn't necessarily has to be related with your PhD, but in order to do that transition and get hired in a really good lab, you keep in mind that you have to get funding, and there are a lot of resources to do that, and you have to be proactive on try to find them. Also, the institution that you're interested, conferences are very helpful to go to the booths directly and ask for fellowships, and also for minority fellowship, which the competition is lower, and to have more options. And I think that's,
Yeah, I think in terms of resources, I'll stress again, networking. So go to meetings, meet people. Like Manuel said, stay in contact. But the purpose is twofold, is so that you're in the spotlight, but also so that if you think you would like to work with somebody, you get to know that person, right? And then it's your decision. Then could I work with that person for 3-4 years? Or no, maybe the style of that person doesn't fit my needs. So I think that's the reason why it's important to network. But in terms of resources, yes, like Janitza said, you can use, so like Science Careers, Nature Jobs, you can search for postdocs there. I think also societies, depending on your field. For example, for me, Society for Developmental Biology posts all the postdoc jobs. Society for Neuroscience does the same thing. So if you belong to a professional society, they also have job boards where they post all these opportunities for postdocs. That's a place where you can definitely look.
Something that I want to add, I started my postdoc with an institutional grant from Yale, from the Department of Psychiatry, that lasted for my 2 first years. And afterwards, since my PI had a narrow one, and that's something also to keep in mind, you could always ask for a supplemental grant to hire you, whichever long lasts the R01, the parent grant from your PI. If you're interested, obviously, on that R01 objectives. Also, try to get funding from foundations once you're established at least a year or 2 in your lab. Foundations are from different disciplines. Specifically, I applied for the NARSAT Young Investigator Grant, and that gave me more money to get my own research to get done. And that will give you even more independence and more freedom to do the research that you want to do.
Great, awesome. I see there's a lot of really great questions that you guys are sharing on the chat. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on to those. Let's see, the first, before I do that, there's also, in addition to all these fellowships and networking, there's also some programs that help graduate students think about more carefully about postdocs, get ready to get into faculty positions. So part of it is guiding you to the process of postdocs. I know I recently saw a program from the University of Michigan where they you can go, it's like a workshop type, like you go there for several days and you do workshops, and so they give you a lot of advice and preparation to apply for postdocs. So looking out for those kinds of programs that are becoming even more common now is also something that you can do.
Let me plug an ad here.
Yeah, go for it.
Yes. So 2 things. Monica is right. You should go and check in your own institution for this type of program. Here at the University of California, Davis, we have a program that is called Future Programs. And basically it's a full quarter program where students go and basically discuss all of these issues that we're discussing today. And the idea is that hopefully the student basically end up the program and have a better, clearer idea of what they want to do. The other thing that I want to highlight, and perhaps if I find the link right away, I'll post it in the chat, is we here at the University of in Davis, we have a Center for Neuroscience that is hosting this sort of 1 or 2 days activities. And it's, I think the due date is still open until mid-February for you guys to apply. The program basically pays you guys to come here and learn about neuroscience and learn about graduate school and about alternative career and all of these things. So if I find the link, I'll post it right away.
Awesome. You can also email it to us and we can share it with the fellows if you don't find it right away. Sure. Okay. Let's go with Priscilla. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question? I know that you asked a little bit ago, but do you want to speak up and share your question?
Yeah, sure. So my question was about competitiveness. You know, at least when I was applying for my PhD, I applied to several universities, you know, because it's very competitive. So some of them will not get you. So I was just wondering how competitive it is to get a postdoc. You know, will you, if you, take all the advice that you guys are giving us and we do it, is there still a chance that because we're so many and there are not many positions, we won't get it or something like that?
I think you have a good shot of getting a postdoc. I think as long as you try to do as many of the things we've mentioned, I think the chances of getting a postdoc are very good. I mean, Manuel can probably speak better to this, but I think a lot of faculty consider a lot of postdoc applications and usually end up hiring postdocs. So I think I think there will not be a shortage of opportunities. Unless it's a very popular lab and like I said, you apply to it like 3 months before you're done and they say they don't have a spot. But other than that, I think the chances are pretty good.
So let me just add that and kind of merge it with one question from Fabi Cruz that says if you should do a postdoc in a similar field as your PhD. So first of all, and going directly to Priscilla's question, the only reason that you're going to get rejected is if you don't apply. You're going to get a postdoc no matter what. And if you have a good pedigree and you show that you're a hardworking person, offers will come. That's not that's not going to be a major issue. What I will encourage all of you guys is, again, apply, talk with people, and make sure that you have a set plan at least a year in advance. Start looking and making sure that you communicate with the person that you want to work with effectively and clear so that you can get that job, okay? With regards to whether your postdoc should be in the same field as your PhD, the answer is no. And the answer is, it depends on what you want to do. I did my PhD in ion channel, acetylcholine receptor structure and function. And I learned techniques as molecular biology, electrophysiology, and a little bit of biochemistry. For my postdoc, I decided that I wanted to learn how to do calcium imaging. And I was always interested in doing research in signal transduction mechanisms, cellular signal transduction mechanisms. So for my postdoc, what I did is I had my my offers in related fields to the ones that I did my PhD. So I studied the same thing, structure and function of ion channels, and they were from very good labs. But my goal was to learn different techniques in a lab that I was able at the same time to apply the skills that I already knew. Mm-hmm. And that's how I ended up with my postdoc. I contacted this person, which I basically stayed in touch with him for about 3 years before I graduated. And I told him, hey, I'm graduating. Do you have an opening for me? And sure enough, he said yes. And when I went for interviews, and I did the interviews at the same time, like Janitza mentioned, that was my last interview, and the type of research that I was gonna do there matched at the time exactly what I wanted to do: calcium imaging, electrophysiology, molecular biology, and signal transduction mechanisms. And it was in a completely different area from what I was doing. But at the end of the day, it worked out, and that's what I'm working on still these days. So. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Reyna or Janitza, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, I think, did you stay in similar fields? I think, Janitza, you did kind of stay in neuroscience for your postdoc.
Well, I did my PhD in neuroscience, basic science, so bench work, a lot of bench work. So I definitely wanted something different. And in the interviews, although it was risky, I did emphasize that I wanted, if possible, to do clinical research. Like, even if it was a side project in the lab, I wanted to be involved. And I wanted to know ahead in advance if it was a possibility. And that was gonna be my yes or no decision if I decided to join a lab. And so for my postdoc, the interview, I know that the labs that I was more interested were doing genetics science, but in humans. And there were a lot of bioinformatics stuff that I had no clue about when I finished my PhD. However, this is a field that is constantly growing and constantly being updated. So there is a lot of space for learning also from people from different fields. And I strongly encourage, if you have some interest on clinical research, big data, that's the future. So I joined this lab. They knew about my basic science training, but it was also on epigenetics, but it was more about working with animal models. And this lab had nothing to do with animal models. However, the people, the PIs that ended up hiring me, they did notice that I was like very enthusiastic, highly motivated, proactive. In my interview, I stressed a lot the fact that I did know nothing about epigenetics when I started my PhD, and I was willing to learn bioinformatics for my postdoc no matter what, because that's something that I wanted to do. So I was very lucky because I was chosen, but I think, like we already said, if you don't ask, you don't know if you're gonna get it or not. So the first thing is to ask, and ask for what you wanted to do, because if you ended up in a lab that you're not sure that that's something that you like, think about it, like you're gonna be there for at least 4 years, or ended up quitting and you don't know if it was because it was a bad fit from the very beginning. So yeah, I definitely changed fields, and the reason why that worked out, I think it was because I had my own funding. I think I said that like 4 times already, but that's the key. I mean, nobody would say no to free workers. So I mean, it's a addition to the lab, and there's no drawback.
I stayed in a similar field, if anything, same model system. And the reason for me was a very personal one, because I guess my PhD wasn't linear in the sense that I kind of switched fields when I was doing the PhD. So when I finished, I wanted to stay something similar where I could use all the technical expertise I had gained in the PhD, even if in a different sense. So I was in a lab where it was developmental biology, but my PhD was more on understanding transcriptional regulation of genes involved in eye development, particularly actually one of them. And so, and I also did some regeneration work, which is what I'm going back to now, but that's another story. So for me, I sit in the same model system, but doing like Janitza did, that she switched fields, it's very common, actually. It's not uncommon. And I think in terms of training grants, or not necessarily training grants, but even the NRSAs for postdoc, one of the things that they look at, the reviewers, is whether you've switched fields or not, because your training potential increases if you have changed fields. So that's something that they look at positively. Just putting it out there, because it's something that I came across when I was applying and did my postdoc.
Great. So changing fields, definitely encouraged, not a problem. I mean, I think it's about knowing what you want to do next and how you can apply what you learned in your PhD, not just the techniques, but actually, you know, what you've learned about becoming an independent scientist and how you can apply that during the postdoc so that you can further your skills and further your independence as an investigator. And, you know, when it comes to marketing yourself, you know, I think tapping into those skills that you already know and showing and talking about, you know, how you can apply it to a different set of questions to a field is certainly going to be valuable. I want to go to Corines, because her question is related to something that Janitza mentioned about having her own funding. Corines, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, hi. Yeah, I was wondering how receptive are the PIs about that? Because I'm curious, okay, you have your own funding if you write and you get an institutional grant, but how do I make that approach in a field that I want, but it's not like what they do in their laboratory? How receptive are they for that kind of, you know, approach from me, the student?
Ooh.
I guess so. I'm guessing that depending on the field that I am, cardiovascular physiology and pharmacology, and even neuroscience, certain areas of neuroscience, I don't think anybody expects you to come up with your own funding from the get-go. I mean, if you have it, fantastic, of course. Hopefully, and at least that's how I treat all my postdocs. I mean, they're in training, so basically they're coming to me, and hopefully I have enough funding to support them at least for that first year. But it's depending on the field, and I agree that if you have your own funding, you're gonna be chances are you're gonna be even more successful in getting a postdoc and moving forward. And I completely forgot the question. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
So I think, I think her question is you know, if you have your own funding, but also I think her question is related. If you're coming to a postdoc lab and you have your own ideas about a project that you would like to do, that it's not necessarily something that it's being done in the lab, like how do you approach that?
Yes, so that's why communication, I was going there. That's why communication is so important. There are laboratories where basically the PI would like to do only his or her research, and that's it. And you need to understand that from the get-go. There are laboratories where the postdoc is given complete 100% freedom, and you can do whatever you want as long as you are productive. So that, I think in that sense, communication is absolutely necessary. You need to make sure that the person that is going to hire you understand that you understand what is the expectation from the person that hire you. And you need to make your expectation to that person extremely clear. You need to let them know that that's exactly what you want to do. And that person at that point will tell you either he's okay with it or he's not okay with it. And then you need to decide what you really want to do. Communication in that kind of, in that sense, is absolutely necessary. And it has to be clear from both parties.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree with Manuel. I mean, there are labs that you, so to the beginning of the question, you usually are not expected to come in with your own funding for a postdoc. Usually within the first 2 years is when you start applying for funding. Most labs fall within the range that as long as what you're doing is remotely related to what the lab works on, if it's really a cool idea and it's interesting, it's exciting, no PI is going to say no to that. But make sure that, like Manuel said, you make that clear what your intentions are since the beginning. And also you, as part of your interviews, remember that when you're interviewing, they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So you have to get a sense of what the environment is and what you think you might be able to do and what you might not be able to do, what kind of lab it is that you're going to go to.
Right, yeah, I will echo to what has been said and add that, yeah, keep a good communication. And if you find that PI is not a good fit because it does not give you a space for your own development as a scientist to do side projects that you're more interested on, maybe that's not a good fit. And maybe you should find another mentor that will be much better in terms of training.
Great. Let's see. I wanted to go to Bianca's question. Let's see, where is it? Bianca, do you want to go ahead and ask your question about negotiation?
Yeah, I actually have a couple questions that are not really related, but they're twofold and they'll get to the point. So you are all in academic postdocs, but I know that NIH sets a base salary for postdocs. Did you negotiate, and how long did you negotiate? Were you able to negotiate salary or a moving sort of bonus or plan with that? And then I guess my next question, if you want to think about it while you're answering the first one, is if any of you considered any postdocs in industry, but mostly the first one.
Okay. Yes, there are set salaries for postdocs, and that will depend on the years. I'm attaching the recent announcement of the adjustment that was made on the salary. These are used more often as a guideline for you and for your PI, and you could definitely negotiate at as long as it's very close to what is followed by the NIH. I guess Manuel could add more about that since he's the one hiring postdocs. But on the second one, I really didn't consider industry.
I should, this Giovanna, I want to interject. Bianca was focusing on salaries and compensation, I think, but I think there's other types of negotiation that maybe Janice and Reyna and Manuel can talk about. Other aspects of your position that you could negotiate.
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. They reminded me of something. So in terms of negotiating salaries for postdocs, so NIH sets the limits, right, of what's the minimum and of what's the highest that they can pay you. And usually the higher end is for cities that are more expensive to live in. So usually there's not really a lot of room for negotiation because depends on the cost of living at the city that you're going to. And usually the institution sort of sets what the pay range is for a first year, second year, third year postdoc. But I mean, it doesn't hurt. If you want to ask, you can. But I mean, everybody pretty much goes by what the standards of NIH guidelines are. But in terms of negotiation, there are other things that you have to look at that is not just the salary. For example, when I came in, and this is something my PhD advisor always told me, is like when you go to interview for a postdoc, you have to be clear since the beginning with your PI that you work with, what is it that you can take with you from the work that you do? Because not everything that you do in the lab is going to go with you. Part of it is going to be really the base of the lab that you're working at. So that's not work that you can take with you to establish your own lab. So it's always good to ask and establish from the beginning what kind of projects you want to do. So the way I thought about it, and maybe Manuel and Janice have other experiences, was that I try to see, usually the people that I interview with, actually, mostly everybody offers you like a project that you can start working on, of course, that you're interested in, but that you can start getting data right away and get papers out, right? And then there's another project that is more open-ended where you can drive your own ideas. And then that's the project that whatever data you derive from there, you can apply for grants, and then establish your own lab from that work. So that's something that in the negotiations, that is something that is really important that you talk about from the beginning, I think.
Yeah, so just to add, NIH basically define what is the salary these days. And what you can do is, as Reyna mentioned, is just ask. Me personally, we live in California. I live in California, extremely expensive state. So basically to entice people to come to my lab, they don't even have to ask me. I typically provide or mention the possibility of having a little bit of extra money, supplement their NIH base salary with a little bit extra, but that's just me. You have to do that with each particular PI. What kind of things you can negotiate? You certainly can negotiate your moving expenses. That is not covered, and there are many places where, or many people where they're not gonna cover that for you. You're moving and you have to pay for it. But it's something that you can bring up during the negotiation discussions, and probably people, what they might be able to do is pay you a month ahead of the time, or start you 1 month before you actually get to the lab and get your moving expenses that way, or they're going to be able to pay you your moving expenses up to a certain point. Time of the postdoc, you need to basically be clear on that too. What is the expectation? Is it a 2-year postdoc? Is it a 1-year postdoc? Are they going to be able to keep you for 3 years, 4 years, etc.? So you need to negotiate that too. And that's also based on what you want to do. Do you want to go to the industry later on? So if you want to go to the industry, maybe you want a 2-year postdoc, and you have to be clear with your PI about that. Research. Reyna said it all. I agree 100% with what she said. You're going to get most likely you're going to get a project that you're going to start publishing, and if you see an opening that you can develop on your own, that's typically the research that we are able, the people that stay in the academia will be able to take with them. But it's also something that you need to negotiate with your PI, your principal investigator. you have to keep in constant communication with that person, because it could be that side project that you start doing all of a sudden becomes the main project of the lab, and it's the one that's going to fund the next grant, etc. So, and if that happens, I can guarantee you're not going to take that project with you. So you need to be in constant communication again with your principal investigator. Make sure that there are some clear guidelines as to what you can take with you and what is going to be left behind once you leave.
Also, I saw in the comments something about if you're interested in teaching and getting teaching experience. That's something really important. I think it was Joanna that mentioned it. That's something that you can also ask while you're interviewing and try to find out where you're going to go. I know that now there are programs that are NIH funded where you can go to a postdoc where you can also teach and get your teaching experience, because not everybody wants to be a PI that's just biomedical research and not be able, for example, a position where you teach undergraduates. So the need for those positions is there, and that's why I think these programs are springing up, and I've heard really good things about it. So that's something that you can also keep in mind if you're interested in teaching and while you're doing your postdoc.
Yeah, those teaching postdocs are, the programs are called IRACDA. There's different institutions across the US that have such programs. And so the actual training is more focused on giving you the skills you're gonna need so that you can be, or go to a teaching intensive position. You still have to do some research, but the training is geared towards, you know, getting to in a position where you can do predominantly teaching. So that's another option. I wanted to, I saw a couple of questions, so I'm going to combine them about the length of a postdoc. You know, I think one great point that Simara made is that, you know, it's not like the PhD that you have a degree at the end of the time that you spent training. You know, you don't leave with a postdoc saying, like, adding letters to your name. And so how long, I think this depends on the field, but how do you know that you're done? How do you know it's time for you to move on from a postdoc? And, you know, how long do you recommend that a postdoc be? And I know this can be a thorny question, so I'll leave it to you guys.
Okay, I think I can start with that because I'm the one right now asking how long it should be, because it's my third year. I think the definition of a completion of a postdoc in the academia, at least, is whether or not you're ready for a K award. So the K award, as they already mentioned in the chat, are these career development awards that give you, I think, 5 years of funding, and that's when you become independent academic researcher. To write the K award, you need enough pilot data of your own work, and also publications, at least 2 or 3 publications based on what the program officer told me from NIDA, which is the institution that I have to apply the drug abuse, and 2 or 3 publications for authors. So my estimation is that it will take at least 3 to 4 years to have a good application for a K award. I guess that's what my negotiation, how my negotiation was with my PI so far. I think it's a matter of how fast I published and how well I developed the application.
I mean, I think an average, you know how they say average in graduate school is 6 years, but an average people say 3 to 5 years, although from what I'm hearing now and colleagues that I have, it's at least in the biomedical sciences, neuroscience, People are taking 5-6 years to have something where not only published and were productive, but also have something to take with them. And also there's the possibility of doing more than one postdoc, right? Not, but shorter postdocs instead of doing just a long one in a single lab. For example, if you're in a lab and you get a K award, definitely you could stay there for a while. Or if you see that you want to acquire additional experience, then you can do a second postdoc for a shorter amount of time. But the average is about 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And I think, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Following up with the another question that I think also is relevant is how much work do you need to do in your postdoc? The PI is going to ask you for a lot. My former PI for my PhD did ask me for a lot, and it was hard for me to say no. So I ended up working as much as a postdoc that I know here at Yale in microbiology labs. So I guess that's why it's very important to find a good mentor, a good lab with a nice environment, and learn from the postdocs and PhDs from that lab how is the work-life balance. And I think that applies also for PhD.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, in terms of the length of a postdoc, it just depends. I did a 3-year postdoc, and it just happened that I was able to, when I was 2.5 years into my postdoc, I was able to get a development grant. So, and that basically put me into a different category. I became a research assistant professor. When did I know that I was ready? I never did. It just happened. And I don't have a good answer for that. It just one day, I think my past, I've been very lucky. I have worked very hard, but I've been very lucky as well. And one day somebody called and they wanted me to apply to UC Davis. And I did and went for an interview. This is the only place that I interview. So I really don't, my story in that sense is not the typical story. At the time when I was offered my current position, it was at that time that I realized, I think I'm ready to go to the next step. And that was my process. So it's going to be different for everybody. I have some friends that basically after 3 years or after 2 years, they say, I'm ready to go on my own. And they applied for a position. They wanted to stay in the academia, so they applied for a position. There were other people that it took 7 years for them. And after 7 years, they decided, okay, I'm ready now. And that's how they move on to the next level. It's just, it's very variable. And I don't think there is a clear-cut time where you say, I'm really ready to go to the next level. At least it didn't happen for me. It was a completely random thing that happened and got this amazing opportunity, and I had to take it. And that's how I knew that I was ready. But if you feel that you are ready, you need to make sure that you understand and that you know what is it that you need to do then to get to the next level. That would be my recommendation. So make sure that you have your grants going, that you have enough preliminary data to get perhaps your K awards, your R1s, whatever award you're gonna apply, so that you can move on then to the next level. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. That's really great advice. All right. I want to go to Victor. I know you have a couple of questions that you wanted to ask.
Yeah. So I just had a few questions. I guess I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Victor. I'm a third-year student at Cornell University. Okay. So just a few questions I had were not so much, I just want to change briefly the conversation to, I guess, just your own experience as a postdoc. So I was just wondering, how did your dynamic, I know you already touched on this to some regard, but I just wanted you to, I guess, reiterate or perhaps specify, like, how exactly did your dynamic PI student dynamic change, you know, like what was some of the things that changed with respect to how you were treated by a PI when compared to your time as a grad student?
You mean in sense of how you're treated and or what kind of work do you do, or in what sense do you mean?
I think I want to go with both.
Both. Okay. I think in let me see if I can answer the question. I think in terms of how you're treated, I mean, even when you're almost done with your PhD, you're also seen more as a colleague, right? And by the time you're done, definitely. It's the same thing when you're a postdoc. Depending on the environment that you're in, right? There are some places, and this is something you gotta watch for, that they just want postdocs to be able to do all the work that they wanna do. Basically, they're not interested in training you. And that's something that you gotta watch out for. And actually somebody, a senior PI, told me that, remember, wherever you go, the postdoc is a training position. And if you don't see it as that, then it's probably not a good fit. And that's something that I actually kept my eyes open for. In terms of the work, I think as a postdoc, you can get a lot of work done basically just because of your proficiency technically, at least in what my field is, which is biomedical, right? But you have a little more freedom to plan your experiments and you're expected to be able to do so, right? To plan your experiments with appropriate controls, with, you know, have a backup plan if something doesn't work. But not only that, come up with your own hypotheses, predict what could go wrong and what you would do if it did, that kind of thing. And I think you have more freedom in regards to that, to your work, as long as you're being productive, right? And getting those papers up. I don't know if that answered your question or if anybody else has some other input.
I think the dynamic changes, and I hope it changed, because the reason why you're doing a postdoc is that you want to get more independence. So your mentor during your postdoc should give you more flexibility in terms of the kind of project that you want to have as your own. As a PhD student, you're always in training, and doesn't necessarily mean that you will have your own project. But as a postdoc, definitely you should have it, because otherwise it won't be the right training for you to develop for the next step. Personally, I think my postdoc PI does give me as much flexibility as I need in terms of the projects that I want to be involved with. I think one of the reasons why is because the kind of work that we do is genomics. So we have potential to work with different databases. And that will give you more flexibility in terms of the collaborations that we want to do, the kind of work that we want to focus on. I'm not sure about other fields, but yeah.
So I just want to clarify a little bit the question. Victor, what you're asking is about the dynamics between the student and the mentor?
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I was trying to just do, because I mean, I know I understand more or less my interactions with my PI as a grad student, but I was wondering how potentially that changes now that you're more like almost on the same level as he or she is. I'm just wondering if anything
So,
changes, I guess.
yeah, okay. So, but I can tell you that it changes. I don't know if it is a cultural thing or for me personally, or it was just the way that I am. But when I was in grad school as well as in my postdoc, I had a good relationship with both of my mentors, but I also had a very respectful and not so much of a friendly relationship. I was not a friend of my mentors. After I finished, and now that I am in this position, our relationship has evolved even more into a more of a friendship. We are seen as equals, and it's very good that I can just call them and say, hey, I have this problem. How can I solve them? They are advisors to me now. They are my friends. They are my advisors, my trusted advisors. I call them and they answer me, and they give me their best the best advice possible. That is my experience. That doesn't mean that it happens the same way for everybody. So yeah, you have to see what's happening, or it could be different. The bottom line is that it could be different for everybody.
That actually, your Victor's question and what you just said, Manuel, is I think actually is a good segue to a question that Nicole shared. Nicole, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. So hi, my name's Nicole Rosa, and I'm a first-year student at Yale University. And I was wondering if any of you had a sense for the lab environment. And how much time did you get to interact with the people in the labs that you were going to join for the postdoc? And if you did get a sense, was it accurate?
Yeah, I think so. So I think wherever you go interview for a postdoc, you should have time to interact with the lab. If you don't, that's gotta make you wonder if it's really a place that you're gonna want to end up in. Usually the typical postdoc interview, you come in, you do an entrance interview with whoever's trying to hire you. Then you get to meet with the postdocs, the students. You usually have lunch with them. Then you have your seminar. And then sometimes, usually places give you a chance to meet with some of the PIs if you want to. And then in the end, you have an exit interview with the person that's hiring you, right? So you should get time to talk to the people in the lab, and you should have time to go into the lab and see what the environment is like. As to the question of how do you know if that's the right environment, it's sort of like when you picked your graduate, research lab. I know that you do rotations, but like in terms of when you apply to graduate school, you just know what place is appropriate for you, right? After you go visit and you have your interviews, it's kind of the same thing, I think. And you know, right, when you talk to the person, you sort of get a sense of what the PI will be like, and if you don't, you start asking all the questions that we've talked about, and you can get a better sense of what the place is like.
Yeah, my experience was that when I was doing the interviews, in some labs, they even, the grad students and the postdoc even invited me for lunch just with them. And that's the time that you get to ask questions. But for other labs, like the postdocs were just staring at the computer all the time, and you didn't even notice my presence there. And I ended up in the latter. But the dynamics are totally different from my experience. I mean, now we went bowling last weekend. We do dinners in each house every weekend. I mean, I don't know. That's totally random, I think.
Yeah. I mean, when I interviewed, I had an awkward interview where the PI just wanted me to just go join and not even give a seminar. And I was so weirded out by that. It just didn't sound right. It didn't feel right. So I was like, okay, thank you very much for your interest. But no, this is not for me. So yeah, I mean, you'll definitely know.
Yeah, so when you go for your interview, make sure that you have your schedule beforehand so that you know who you're gonna meet with. Prepare for that. If you can do, now that we have internet, make sure that you Google everybody and that you know that what each person is doing. And ask questions. So to those postdocs that are in those labs, ask questions. Make sure that that you get the most information possible from them. Typically, postdocs, if they are disgruntled, they're gonna pull you up and they're gonna say, "Hey, yeah, there's something wrong going on here," but don't tell that it was me. So I mean, that kind of things will happen. So make sure that that you take notes and that. That you put it in a balance at the time of choosing whether you are going to join that lab or not. Make sure that you also, if you have a quirk, I don't know. So I have a postdoc that basically came for interview, and he said, "Well, you know what? I think when I'm doing experiments, I like to think. Is that a problem with you?" And I said, "Well, okay." So, but he's very nice and he works a lot. So I knew that. And now when I'm in the lab doing experiments, he's thinking. But I knew about that. So there's nothing, I mean, I knew about that. He was upfront with me and he told me, I think. So that's things like that typically happen. So make sure that you also provide what is your expectation. If you don't like to work during the weekends, you should tell that to your PI, because his expectation, particularly in big labs, is that perhaps you have a day shift and a night shift and a weekend shift. And if you're not able or willing to do those type of things, you're going to have problems. So you're going to have a short postdoc with very limited productivity, and it's not going to be helpful for you. So just as many questions as possible.
Yeah, I will add to that. Yeah, be prepared. Be very prepared. I mean, I have a PI that told me the other day in the lab meeting, well, I received this email from this guy that he does plant biology. And what kind of contribution would that do with what we do, which is psychiatry? I mean, if you're approaching them in an email, make sure that you have a very well description of what you do, or what kind of contribution you could give to the lab, and his expertise. Like, talked about his work, how much passion you have about it, why do you like it so much. Also attach your papers. In the interviews, I copied the NPP paper, and I was like, oh, here it is, my paper. And he was like, it is something that he will remember from my interview. And so it's, be very direct on the kind of questions that you want answers for. And that includes, as we were just saying, work-life balance. Like, if you have to work on weekends, have a sense on how late nights are in the lab, and also vacations. Is it 2 weeks? Is it 1 week off? Is it a month? I know months are possible in postdocs, believe me. So also, if you are away from home, would that PI will give you flexibility to travel to Puerto Rico or to any country that you're from to visit your family, in addition to vacation, because that doesn't mean the other. I mean, these are questions that are always good to have clear ahead of time before joining a lab.
Yeah, that's true. That just reminded me of so that varies by institution, but you can ask about the questions that you need about vacations and health insurance. For example, the institution I'm at, even though I was a postdoc, I still earned vacations like I was an employee, basically. Not all institutions are like that. I know institutions where postdocs don't have any vacation days, and it's just by agreement with the PI. I also interviewed somewhere where they told me that the university didn't cover health insurance for me, and that was a no-no for me. So those are things that definitely you need to ask before you join a place.
I hope you're all taking notes. This is really, really great advice. We have about 8 minutes or so left together. And I want to take 2 more questions. Marcos, you have a really good question about publishing and productivity. Do you want to go ahead and ask that?
So hi, good night to everyone. My question is basically, when you're in a postdoc position, how many articles are you expected to publish as a postdoc? Or if the quality of these articles is more important than the quantity of these articles to be competitive after a postdoc?
The answer is as many as possible.
Yeah.
But listen, I mean, sometimes in the field that you are at, it might be a field in which experiments are slow, and you might not be able to get sufficient data for papers up to 1 year, 2 years. If you're working with monkeys, I mean, it takes at least 3 years to train a monkey or do all these sorts of things. So it takes a lot of time. So my own personal experience, I have a postdoc that just moved to his academic position at the University of Louisville. And we published 5 papers together. We get, when we send grants from him, people says, oh, he wasn't productive. But he got papers from Circulation Research, Science Signaling, and a whole bunch of other top-notch journals. Just to do that work, it requires a lot of time. And the reason that he was hired is because the quality of his research was amazing. And not because it's my research, but it was high quality research. And when he went for his interview at Louisville, he also did his homework, and he was able to then get the job. But it's also, again, that very important question. I will say shoot for as many papers as you can. And in as higher journal as possible. High quality journal as possible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, high impact journals are definitely necessary if you want to be competitive for K awards. I mean, not necessarily a Nature paper, but at least in your field, if it's a specific field that is very hard to get into Nature or Science, then make sure to get into those journals that are considered very like highly with high impact factor. So for example, when I was talking to the program officer, and this is strongly encouraged, feel free with either if it's an NRSA and F31 or the postdoc, or a supplemental or a K award, the program officers will ask questions. They're there for you, basically. Do not hesitate to email them, or if you find them in conferences, just approach them. They're extremely helpful. So when I'm considering now to apply for this K award, and I was in constant communication with the program officer at NIDA and NIH, and he saw my supplemental grant, and he was actually recommended me to write the K award. And in conversations with him, he suggested me for at least 3 first author publications, 2 to 3, and a few in the pipeline. So I think that will give a concrete idea of the amount of publications that they will consider as good enough or as competitive for a K award, and also at least one of them in high impact factor journal.
That 3 articles are precisely from your postdoc or counting your PhD or your graduate study?
From postdocs.
Also?
Mm-hmm.
All postdocs. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we have time for one more question, and I am going to go to Simara for that last question.
Okay, so I hope you can all hear me. I'm assuming you can hear me. So my question is basically directed towards, I have not heard during any point of this conversation about having any interest towards going into the entrepreneurship field. Like during your postdoc, do you feel that instead of working for the industry or instead of working for the academia, have any of you considered diving into the entrepreneurship field, building your own company or whatsoever? And like, please explain yes or no, or why not, etc.
That is an excellent question. And being on the other side now, I can tell you this running a lab almost feels like your small business. This is it's very rewarding job, but it's also a very demanding job. And you are always thinking about entrepreneurship. You always are thinking, what can I develop that I could patent or that I could move on into the next level? That's always in the back of the mind. At least it's in the back of my mind all the time, and I'm pretty sure it's for many other people. So yes, it is there, but it's at this point in my career, it's not something that I am pursuing very actively. But certainly, you're always thinking if you're able to discover something that you can patent or that you can move on into clinical settings. Actually, that's why we write NIH grants, right? Because we want, or at least that's a rationale for many of the grants. We want to discover new targets of drugs and things that we could help with different diseases. So it's always there. And I think that many institutions have programs that can help you with that, to develop that area. Even if you're a postdoc, there are tons of, there are multiple offices that will be, that I would highly recommend you to basically go and talk with them and see how you can, if that is what you want to do, see how can you develop that area for yourself.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. It's something I have not come across, but I have read about people that, not very many, but people that have done that. And so, yeah, if you're interested in that, I mean, the grants that Manuel was talking about, the SBIRs from the NIH are targeted to that. So, and definitely there's some interest in growing that sort of area. So that's something that you can look at. I see that in the chat, they're posting about opportunities like that. So if you're interested in that, I definitely encourage you to look into those.
Excellent.
Yeah, so yeah, I will add that I didn't consider entrepreneurship. I think that the tools weren't as developed as now. Like, I think the field is emerging, and now there are more opportunities to get into different paths, including entrepreneurship. I did consider science policy and even participated in a student organization while I was on my PhD. But I ended up in the academia. But I think if that wasn't the case, I definitely would have considered science policy instead.
Excellent. Okay, so that's all the time that we have, unfortunately. You guys have had excellent questions. Thank you so much to Victor, Simara, and Eileen, who took the lead of coming up with questions and finding resources. I thank all the other fellows for your very interesting questions and probing questions. I think you challenged our panelists with some of your questions, and I think that was really amazing. I want to again thank Reyna, Janitza, and Manuel for being with us, for all of your advice and your insight and your wisdom. We will be posting some of the resources that are being collected. We'll be posting them on the Yale Ciencia Academy blog on Ciencia Puerto Rico. And we'll also be sending them to the fellows. So again, thank you so very much. And we'll see you on the next conversation.
See you guys.
Nice meeting everybody.
Nice meeting you all.
Thank you, everybody.